Okay. So here we have Jack Heel from House in Manchester. He's a technology lead. So, okay. Uh, shall I ask a few questions about how you got to where you are?
Sure thing.
So, so, for example, what does House do? What do you do at House?
So House is a company. We do smart home technology for elderly people. So the idea is that for elderly people who live on their own, we're trying to prolong their independence using simple smart home tech. So our basic kit is a few different sensors that people can place around the home, and they're passive sensors, so they don't like record any video or anything like that, or take photos. One example is a door sensor. So you put two parts of the sensor on the door and the door frame, and it will tell you when the door is opened or closed. Another one is a motion sensor, so we tell when people have moved in front of it. We collate the data from those sensors and use that to build up a picture of an individual's routine, and then we flag up when there's changes in that routine, because that might require I don't know, going to a doctor or getting a family member to properly check in on somebody. So a change could be that there's been no movement at all that morning. So maybe they had a fall during the night, or a change could be that over the last few months they've been getting up later and later, or getting up more and more often in the night. And these changes in routine can often be signs of degradation in health, which is the kind of thing that we're trying to spot early so they can be addressed early, and therefore people can kind of live on their own happily in their own homes for longer.
Right, nice. Yeah, it's a cool idea. So what stage is the tech at? Is it research or being sold or?
Yeah, it's being sold. So we've got a few hundred people using it out in the wild. Some of them have bought the kit. Some of them are part of different trials that we've got going on. So we do some work with the University of Surrey, and a couple of other ones as well, where we've done reasonably small scale trials of the kit, as like research projects. We've done a bit of work with the Dementia Research Institute. So there's various kind of bits of it which are kind of researchy, but there's also, you know, a bunch of people who've bought the kit off our website and, you know, are paying customers. So it's out there in the wild being used at a relatively small scale, like a few hundred homes.
All right, cool. Yeah. So what do you personally do? What as a technology lead?
So I guess I lead on a large amount of the tech. So we have a smallish development team. There's five of us who develop the core product, and pretty much everything up to the actual apps themselves. So our product, we have a mobile app so that people can see the data in there. And the team that I look after, we basically deliver the ingestion of the data, the processing it, the like understanding and the analytics of it, and then serving up some APIs so that the mobile apps can query those APIs. But the app development itself is done. It's done sort of, well, it is in our team, but it's I don't really manage that very closely.
Okay. So sounds like coding and statistics and SQL sort of thing. Is that right?
Yeah, so there's the majority of our coding is done in Python,
Okay.
and the majority of our data is, yeah, in SQL. We use a Postgres database. So pretty much all of it is using Python to ingest and interpret the data, and also using Python to analyze the data. We use a bit of R for some sort of exploratory stuff, and using a Postgres database, so SQL to store the data, and then using Python again to query that database and serve up these APIs, so that the apps can use them. So yeah, majority of it is Python and databases, and yeah, doing a lot of the coding around that and kind of the systems architecture around linking all those things together.
Oh, nice. Okay. So what? How long have you been in this job?
So I've been there for just over a year and a half. I started in October 2018.
Okay. Um. So can we back up? How did you get to this point? Like what did you do before that? And like what are your qualifications and stuff?
Sure. So I did mathematics as my degree, and then after that I did a multidisciplinary PhD. So it's basically applied mathematics applied to molecular biology. So it's modeling protein drug interactions. So it's kind of biology, but mainly focusing on like the mathematical modeling of it. And we did that on a computer, so I kind of got into coding. And I did a postdoc, which was in a similar sort of research area. I was in a chemistry department, but again, looking at protein molecules and building software tools to help make models of these protein molecules before people tried to make them in the lab. So there was a little bit of like machine learning in there. There was a little bit of software development in there. So bits of maths, bits of programming. And then I worked for cancer research for a while, and that was in a scientific computing core facility. So they had a bunch of research groups there, everybody doing bits of various cancer research. A lot of those projects they were doing needed computers, and they needed to design these like data analytics pipelines on the computers and make sure that they were run well and run efficiently on a supercomputer. And I worked in a team that worked with those research teams to facilitate that research. So that's my background, which went from mathsy stuff to computery stuff. And then when I left CIUK, I was looking to do something in the business world because I'd never worked in like a company before. It had all been a research background, but I still wanted to be involved with like the problem solving stuff that I enjoyed. So kind of mathsy type stuff. And that's why the data science aspect of my job at the moment really appealed. But I can also still, I'm able to do in my day-to-day job quite a lot of programming and software development, which I enjoyed doing during my postdoc. So my current role kind of knits both of those things together, which is quite nice.
Right, nice. So is that right? You did a bachelor's in maths and then a master's interdisciplinary, so a bunch of different things, and then but still maths and some coding, and then PhD that was more coding and protein interaction. Did you say?
Yeah,
Um,
so my PhD was
yeah.
kind of split half between theory and experiment. So
Right. Cool.
roughly half the time I was doing experiments in the lab. So using using these proteins in test tubes or whatever, and doing some experiments on those. And then the other half was doing experiments on a computer. So building models of the things I was doing in the lab and trying to get the two to basically use the computer models to understand the results we saw in the lab. So that was my PhD. So it's half in the lab, half in the at the computer. And then after that, I kind of left the lab work behind. Didn't really like it so much, but really enjoyed the computational stuff. So that's why I'm kind of in that area now.
Yeah, sure. Okay. So then you worked in academia and then in companies now. Yeah, that's cool. So yeah, was that difficult making the transition from academic jobs to commercial jobs?
I think it was hard for me to sort of say goodbye to academia, and I think a lot of people who do postdocs or PhDs or whatever, you aren't necessarily made aware of the opportunities that are out there. You have to hunt them out for yourself, because when you're in an academic environment, most of the people there, at least initially, want to stay in that environment, and the academics that you're kind of working for are very much geared towards academic jobs because that's their field of expertise. And you often feel, or like I think people often feel, I certainly did, like you're kind of throwing things away if you leave that sort of environment. So it's not an easy decision to make. And it does feel, I don't think this is totally true, but there's certainly aspects of it, and it does feel this way, that once you leave academia, that door kind of closes behind you, because the longer you're away from it, the worse your publication record gets, and therefore it's very tricky to get back in. So it's a big decision to leave. But when you do start looking elsewhere, a lot of companies are looking for people with computational skills, with problem solving skills, mathematical skills. And so I think if you're willing to possibly start a little bit lower down the ladder, you can work your way up quite quick, and there are quite a lot of opportunities out there. So yeah, it's difficult to say goodbye to academia, but there's quite a lot out there that you can look for with those skills.
Okay. But so it sounds good that you're you're a technology lead, so you're leading something, right? You're not too low down. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I mean, I work at a very small company, so
Okay.
obviously, with any of these job titles, they might mean a lot more at a large company than they do in a small company, so all things are relative. But yes, I joined at a good time, which is quite fortunate. When I started, there was one developer already working there, and so I became two, and we worked together on a lot of stuff. And now we've got, as I said, a team of five, so we've kind of expanded that. And I've been fortunate to be there at that time, so I've been part of that expansion. Um, and so yeah, now I have a little team. We work together on a lot of stuff, but I'm kind of, yeah, I guess the lead of that small team. Um, so yeah, part of it's kind of circumstance in a way, like fortune joining a company at a time when it's growing. Um, Hopefully that will continue to grow and we'll get a bigger team and I'll be part of that as well.
Well, yeah. So you said you started in October 2018, right?
Yeah,
Okay, cool. Yeah. So yeah, I guess everyone's locked down now. So
yeah.
have you been working from home the whole time?
Yeah,
Or
haven't
is
been
that
to a hairdresser's in 4 months.
yeah,
Yeah, so we started working from home just before the lockdown, like maybe a week or two before. Um, and to be honest, the transition was pretty straightforward overall, because we're very much um, in contact still. Like we're a relatively small team, so it's fairly easy to coordinate. Like we only really need one sort of Slack channel to do all our communication on. We meet up twice a day, on Zoom or whatever, just to kind of very short meetings, see how everybody's getting in. I've found a lot of my time is spent on calls, and that's the kind of lead bit, I suppose. I'm kind of, whilst a lot of my job is coding, probably the other half of it maybe is managing people. So kind of overseeing and helping with the work they're doing, checking in, and also kind of people managing a bit as well. So there's been a lot of that done via calls. Um, but overall, it was a fairly easy transition to make for a tech team. And there's a lot of good sides to working remotely as well as some challenges.
okay. So you manage a small team, and do you have to report to higher up bosses? Are they technical people or non-technical?
Yeah, so the company was set up by two people. One who leads on the operations side. She's very good technically, but leads on the kind of on operations, so delivering the kits out, dealing with customers, like all that kind of stuff. And the other person is more technical, like loves databases, that kind of thing. And so I report to him, and quite often a lot of the new features and things that we're going to implement will possibly start as an idea in his head and then come through me, and we have conversations about how we might implement it, and then we widen out that conversations with the rest of the team, and then we start implementing it and so on. So yeah, whilst a lot of my time is spent managing the team, a lot of my time is also spent sort of being managed by
Right.
yeah,
Yeah.
the CEO of our company.
Sure. Yeah. Okay. So what made you want to get into this sort of tech? Like yeah, you said like it was a difficult decision to come out of academia, and it sounds like you're in more biological and chemical things. So yeah.
Yeah, I think so. Coming out of academia was hard, but like it was made easier by the fact that the career structure in academia is very difficult to navigate. Like it's very competitive. That's not necessarily a bad thing, but you have to really, really want it and really commit to it. And it was kind of like a work-life balance thing. Like it wasn't really for me. So I wanted to do something a little bit different, where you don't have to move around every couple of years, all that sort of stuff. Um, but in terms of working in this kind of company, I wasn't necessarily looking for working at a small company just doing tech. I wanted to work somewhere where I really sounds kind of cheesy, but really believed in the products. Like wanted to do some good and I think the product is good, and I think it is something that, if it's successful, will do good in the world. So that's kind of important to me. Like, I kind of like doing something sort of connected to science, so that this is more, I guess, data science and pure like research science, but we're trying to advance our understanding of how people's activity around the home can be an indicator and can be correlated to their physical health, and what implications that might have. So that's kind of like an interesting sciencey research type question that we're looking at as well. So it's mostly what the company does, but it's also, having that kind of intellectual challenge, I suppose, that science offered. Having some replica of that in the business world, I think, is important to me.
Yeah, so it's a different work-life balance. You think that's do you enjoy it more in the company? Is this the first company you work for, right?
Yeah, although the job I had at Cancer Research was, I was a staff scientist, so I wasn't a postdoc or anything. So although I was on a fixed term contract, but it was more like being a core member of staff than being like a postdoc. So that was a kind of hybrid job, I guess, between science and working for a company. But now it is, purely working for a company, and I much prefer my work-life balance now compared to when I was a postdoc. There was some stuff about being a postdoc that I absolutely loved, and I do miss a chunk of stuff. But the general kind of sort of overhanging career existential angst that you have as a postdoc, I don't miss that being gone at all.
Yeah, and I guess as more temporary jobs. So as you say, you have to move around. You have to look for jobs when your time's coming up. When your contract's coming to an end, and then you might have to move around the country, right? There are not that many universities. Whereas,
Yeah, or even around the world. Like a lot of
yeah,
depending on your area of research, right? Like it might be that the
yeah,
best groups in your area are based in the States or something, and
yeah,
it would look great on your CV to go there for 2 years. And I think it's a wonderful opportunity for some people, but if it's not what you want to do, then it can be a bit restrictive. That you
right,
might say, oh, actually, I want to do all that, but I want to stay in Birmingham or wherever it is you live. So
yeah. And like you mentioned, once you move out of academia, your publication record sort of becomes old, and you're not adding to it. So, in your experience, do you not publish at all in the company? Because I think some companies, like tech companies, people do publish their research.
yeah, we have. It's yeah. So we've got a collaboration with a group of researchers at the University of Lancaster, and we part sponsor a PhD student there. So we pay half of her funding, and I am involved in supervision there. So I'm kind of the industrial supervisor. There's actually a data scientist in our development team who's very much involved with that as well. So we kind of manage that work. And she's producing a paper, and so there's a chance to contribute to that manuscript basically, and facilitate the research that's involved with the applied area of her work. So she's doing like method development and applying it to some of the data that we have, and so helping with that. So we will have a publication there. They also published a paper before I joined, but the pressure, it's not publish or perish kind of pressure. So it's
Yeah,
not your main kind of bread and butter like currency or whatever of success. It's another task going on. But the main kind of currency is how many customers have you got? Are they happy? How many kits have we sold? Is the service maintained 24 hours a day? So it's different emphasis of pressure rather than how many papers have you got? Were they all in Nature or whatever? So I'm pretty optimistic that I will get some publications while I work here, but it might be a couple over a 3-year period, which wouldn't be enough to sustain you in academia. So it's a side sort of hustle almost.
Okay. So, like, what sort of advice would you give to someone trying to get into like a data science job or a job similar to yours?
So I would say, I mean, there's a set of core skills that it's important to have, but you've probably got them if you've done a numeric kind of degree or PhD. Basic coding skills are really helpful. So something like R or Python, they're pretty easy to learn, just to be able to kind of do fairly quick analysis for people. Like if someone says, "Oh, I just want to, know some stats on this or whatever," to be able to do that kind of thing quite quickly. Science is really good as well for presenting the data. Like I think the communication of complicated things to audiences that might not necessarily know the nitty gritty of stuff is a really valued skill. It's kind of difficult to demonstrate on a CV, but it's relatively straightforward to demonstrate in an interview. So practice that if you get a chance to do presentations. And then when you're looking for jobs, look for and apply for quite widely, because you never know, like you never quite know what people are actually looking for when you just read a job description. And it might well be that you meet what they're really looking for, but they just didn't know how to word it in the job description. So I don't think there's any harm if you've got time on your hands in applying for quite a few things, even if it means you get rejected a lot. Interviews are really good practice for other interviews at worst. If you don't get the job offer, you've learned something. So I wouldn't be put off from applying from things if you only meet half of the kind of criteria. I mean, maybe that's a really annoying thing for people who are looking to recruit, but that's their problem. I'd just apply for stuff, brush up on the basic skills and apply for things.
Yeah, I often find that data science jobs, the adverts, they're basically looking for unicorns. There might be some of those people in the world, but pretty much no one has all of those skills. Like,
Yeah, and I think there's a lot of space, and I think I've basically every job I've had, there's been quite a big element of this where you kind of on your CV you're saying, yeah, I've got these things you've asked for. I don't have these, but I do have these other things that you might not have considered, and often that's quite can be quite attractive if you not necessarily with every job you apply for, but you'll strike a chord quite a lot of the time, I think.
all right, nice. Yeah. So, yeah, what? How many jobs do you think a person should apply for when they're looking to get into data science?
I mean, I really don't know. Like in my last, so when I was applying for a job here, I was in quite a comfortable position because I didn't need to desperately leave the job I was currently in, right? So I wasn't like approaching the end of a contract. I was kind of like quite happy. I was okay to get rejections. I wasn't like, oh, I need to feed the kids now or whatever. Don't have kids, but if I had kids. So I could apply to quite a few things and then compare. Like it was in a very happy position that I could compare a couple of offers and then kind of choose the best one. Um, but I think I can't remember exactly. I applied to like 4 or 5 things, and if I was just starting out and I had like either that sort of position, like I wasn't limited to. I would have kept on applying, right? Like it was the nice position where I had to manage. Oh, I've got 3 interviews this week and all that, so I didn't apply to any more. So I genuinely don't think there's a limit on it. I'd say like um, the danger is not applying enough because you're kind of like doing one thing at a time. Like you've got to tailor the application, right? And so it does take time, but I think like doing them just one and then waiting until that comes through as an offer or rejection and then doing another is just not optimal. Like you should just you should have a few on the go at once, because if they all come in at once and they're all offering you positions, that's a great problem to have.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. Then you can just take the one with the best perks and salary and location and everything, right?
Yeah, and you don't fall into that trap where you're kind of like, oh, I better take this job even though I'm not really sure about it,
Yeah.
because what if another job offer doesn't come along? So I don't really think there's any harm in applying for a few. Um,
Sure. Yeah. Okay. So how can someone get in contact with your company, right? Is it Howz, HOWZ, right?
Yeah, so we've got a website which is just howz.com, howz.com, and
Okay.
there's kind of contact information there in order to get in contact with the company. Yeah.
All right, cool. Excellent. So thanks for that. And best of luck in future. Looks like you're doing really well.
Well, thanks, Vince. It's good to chat to you, and yeah, if I can be a help at all to anybody, they can get in touch.
Cool, man. Cheers. See ya.